You're listening to Reignite, a podcast about expecting the unexpected. I'm MJ.
And I'm Matt, aka Stormageddon.
According to the dossier, we're picking up a Krogan warlord named Okeer. Okeer's scientific research focuses on finding a cure to the genophage, but he's stuck in a facility on Corliss, where a Blue Suns merc named Jador demands he churn out Krogan soldiers for her army. Shepard and their team fight through the Blue Suns and battle-hungry Krogan to get to Okeer. Depending on events at Vermeer, Shepard might spot a familiar face along the way. Okeer has developed a pure tank-bred Krogan to challenge the effect of the genophage. Okeer sends Shepard to deal with Jador, but succumbs to toxic gas during the fight. The dying warlord leaves a final message, asking Shepard to take his legacy with them. Back on the Normandy, Shepard must decide what to do with their new paperweight.
So, for those who haven't guessed already by previous episodes, this is my favorite mission, and we'll get into that shortly. That's why. Okay, it's not my favorite mission, but it introduces my favorite character.
Okay, that makes more sense. Because as a mission, like, it's okay.
Well, yeah, it's not really the mission itself. It's just this mission leads to the introduction of my favorite character, so that's why it's a highlight for me. Also, I've learned at this point, while replaying, that the Blue Suns are just up to no good every fucking where.
The Blue Suns are full of shit. I said it episode 1. I'll say it till the end of time.
But before we deep dive into that, let's do our check-ins. To start, I was very sad that nobody wanted to talk to me.
Basically, everybody's like, now's not really a good time.
I even went to Miranda. Who was like not talking last time either. I was like, all right, surely she'll have something to say to me now. Nope.
Yeah, Joker, I think that their rivalry is going on. It's getting a little more interesting. And a little less like, I hate this, and more like, heh heh.
Yeah, to a point. I mean, Joker is definitely one to crack jokes, and so, like, this dynamic was going to evolve this way, especially since Edie, at this moment at least, is genuinely interested in accommodating the crew and becoming a part of it.
Right. Apparently, he's tweaking maintenance reports, which I consider to be harmless. Like, you're just making yourself look good, and it doesn't really affect anything. Like, it's not going to hurt us in the long run if you make yourself look a little bit better. I don't care.
Yeah, I pretty much handled it the same way. I didn't care much either. I did also, when talking to Joker about who we went out with most recently and who we picked up most recently, he said the Garrus line I teased last episode, where he's like, yeah, Garrus, great. Now the stick isn't up his ass. He's pulled it out and he's beating people to death with it. I never thought I'd say this, but I miss the old Garrus, which I love that line. It's just really great.
I like how Joker and Garrus get to know each other better over time. In Mass Effect 3, their friendship really like picks up, which I think is important and makes me feel happy on the inside. So Kelly has concerns about Jack's temper, which is valid considering Jack ripped through 3 security mechs.
And several walls. It's also unlike Joker to really be per se afraid of anyone, because usually his humor shields him from that, but he seems genuinely afraid of Jack.
Yeah. According to Kelly, Jack is going to be solid under fire, but is very sensitive about personal matters, which I can relate to, I think. Like, in a big, important moment, I can keep my cool, because I can't be panicky right now. Other people need me to be calm. But when it comes to things that are super close to home, then that's a little harder to do. So I can relate to Jack in that.
Yeah, Kelly's perspective on Jack is fairly attuned and accurate, and it makes me... I'm paying more attention to it this time around. Like, I always I liked Jack as a character more because it was a very I looked at her as a very two-dimensional, oh, she's a badass with a bad attitude. I love this character. And I still like Jack now, but I'm seeing more sides of her, especially in the conversation we're about to have with her. And as always, I like checking with Kelly. No flirting options this time around. She's pretty much more or less all business this time. So, no opportunity for that.
I did try to talk to Jacob, and like we said, there's no update there. But I have to emphasize that I don't like the way Shepard talks to Jacob. Because I don't like that I want to talk about you is such a flirty thing to say. Yeah,
the only thing I can say in defense of it a little bit is that that's what male Shepard says also. But I'm sure tone of voice is everything as well. I'm sure male Shep's tone of voice isn't flirty, from what I can tell anyway. But the line, I believe, is the same from what I recall, or very similar at least.
It just bothers me because...
No, it's legit.
I'm not consenting to this kind of flirting, and it's happening anyway, and it makes me feel uncomfortable, and it makes me not want to talk to Jacob if every conversation is going to go like this.
Yeah, the unfortunate truth about the meta of this is it is a video game, and some decisions are kind of made for you mechanically, and this one is just a less than satisfactory option. The fact that also it's pretty common in Mass Effect that what you choose to say and what you actually say are similar but not always the same, and the minor difference can throw the whole meaning out of whack.
Yeah, it drives me insane because a couple years back I was trying to play through it with my friend Molly, who doesn't really like playing video games but likes the narrative nature of Mass Effect. So our deal was I would do the playing and she would make the choices. So she would get the story out of it and would get to make her own decisions. And she would make a choice, and then Shepard would say something, and she'd be like, that's not what I wanted them to say.
Yeah, it can definitely be pretty frustrating. But that said, I do feel like that disparity is less in the third game, if I remember correctly. But also, I thought it was less in this game, and it's not. So it could just be me looking at it with rose-tinted goggles. We'll see as we get to the third game.
Let's talk about Jack.
So yeah, so you can go chat with Jack in the bowels of the ship, the engineering deck. She's on the bottom level, sleeping on a cot. And you get a little backstory from Jack. You get to, she's already has a data pad and is digging into the files, and you can have a conversation with her, finding out more about why she wants to find out what Cerberus has on her.
Yeah, I can't fault Jack for any of her opinions or attitudes because her perspective makes sense when taking at face value. She was raised in a Cerberus facility, she broke free, and she's been on the run, and then Cerberus shows up to buy her from this fucked up prison system that we destroyed, basically. And now she wants all the information she can get, and I am definitely on her side when it comes to that. She's brutal because she's had to be, and our Shepard has had to be brutal in the past as well, so who are we to look down our noses at her?
Yeah, there's definitely no condescension from my Shepard. There are moments in this conversation where I inquire about her aggressiveness, not necessarily questioning her motives, but wanting to know why. Or like there's a line where she's talking about killing people, and you, as male Shepard at least, can ask if it seems like you enjoy killing. And she's like, and she pretty much says, yeah, when you're on the run and always have to look over your shoulder, damn right you do. I want to make all of these people and the people who know those people pay. And again, I can't really fault her for that either. Also, as my Shepard, I admire that kind of determination. I said in the last episode that I'm kind of envious of Jack because at Jack's core, she's the kind of person that I wish I could be. It is very rare that I can act without regard of any of the consequences to do what I have to. I mean, I suppose in these kind of extreme circumstances, it might be different. But at my core, I always try and negotiate and figure out other ways to please everyone. And so I've not acted in the way Jack does. And so I do kind of admire it because it takes a lot of bravery and even a little bit of recklessness and necessarily always thinking ahead to do something like that.
So for this mission, I actually took Jack with me, as well as Garrus.
Same. Yeah, same team again.
How do we do that?
I don't know. Well, for me, I mean, I've had a pretty good habit of taking the previous person I just got to like get a feel for them. And I do already know who I'm taking for the next mission we do because he is my favorite character.
Right.
Likely my team will be this new character we acquire in this mission and Jack for the foreseeable future, but we'll see.
Well, Garrus is always going to be in my team because he's the only person I trust to actually watch my back.
And he's your boyfriend.
Not yet.
In your mind, he already is.
We'll see what happens.
Uh-huh.
So we're immediately dropped into a hot zone, and there is a voice over the speaker basically reciting a manifesto. It's someone who loves the sound of their own voice.
Yeah, even Garrus remarks on that as you pretty much start the mission. This is also the first mission in a while that hasn't really started with a cutscene. This one, you just start the mission and you're more or less in a battlefield already.
Yeah, you just kind of get dropped in, and we find out that the mercs on this planet are killing these Krogan that are coming down from these labs that are being used as target practice. How did you handle the wounded merc?
So this is funny. So when you approach the wounded merc, Garrus points out that it's essentially barely a flesh wound and he'll be fine. Like, even though there's a lot of bleeding, like, it's not a deep injury, so he'll be fine. Essentially giving you the knowledge that you can milk it, which I absolutely did.
I did too.
Like, and and my favorite thing is after the so you have this interaction with this merc, so you can get information out of him. You tell him that you'll give him Metagel if he gives you the information, and then because you know he's not going to die and doesn't need the Metagel, you pretty much go, all right, well, thanks for the info. You better go find a shady spot to bleed out because you're in a lot of trouble. And he freaks out and just runs off going, shit, which was funny enough. And then Jack, because I had Jack with me, went, that was fun.
Yeah. I had the same responses. I think this is a really good moment because we see more of Shepard's humor here.
Uh-huh.
Back in Mass Effect 1, under Alliance regs, Shepard had a very particular responsibility, which they still have, but it's not as strictly regimented. Like, they're no longer under the eye of the Alliance, and they're under the eye of someone that they don't really care that much about impressing, so to speak.
Yeah, I think it's safe to say that Shepard feels more freedom here to be themselves, and that they have a little bit of a morbid humor to them. And I mean, they have to, considering everything they've seen at this point. And so you do really get a sense of Shepard's personality in the second game over the first, and more of it unchained, with them able to kind of just do what they think is right. And we had an injury scenario during the Morden quest where it didn't go this way, where he was really sincere and won over this person who didn't want to talk to him. So, like, we know that it takes all kinds, and that Shepard kind of has a range. But this is the first time we do really get a sense of their sense of humor, which also, like, at least for me, I saw more with either Joker or Garrus than any other character anyway, because there's a familiarity.
Yeah. I can't wait until we pick up our Master Thief, because they also have a very good rapport with Shepard.
Yeah, definitely. And happens to be one of the cooler characters anyway.
Yeah. So after we deal with this wounded mercenary who is now going to bleed out in a shady spot somewhere, we meet a Krogan who is standing guard, so to speak. He's fighting against a couple of Blue Suns, and you join in on his side. He's the first Krogan that you find, and you also don't fight with him. He sees you, and he says, like, you're not like the other people, and that compels me to speak to you. And you find out he's only been alive for 7 days. He was, like, fully grown in a tank. And the way that he speaks reminded me a lot of the Rachni, honestly.
Yeah, you almost get this sense of him speaking, him being a vessel for someone else to speak to you. And there's a little more of an explanation as why it sounds like that when we get further in the mission. But yeah, there's this sense of him just operating almost as a vessel. And it's startling at first because he seems really imposing. He's in full armor. You can't even see his face. I'm like, for me at least, Garrus has his weapon drawn, and Shepard chills him out, essentially tells him to put down his weapon, because Krogan in close quarters are terrifying. They're very dangerous. And so it's typical for anyone to be reactionary in that way. But yeah, and he does want to talk to you, and you can get some information about the facility, but all of it is very broken English, kind of almost whimsical in the way he talks, because it just sounds fanciful and ethereal. It doesn't sound like anything rooted in reality because of the kind of language he uses.
Right. I felt so bad for him. I wrote in my notes, "No one's perfect, bud," because it's true. No one is perfect. And there was a line that he said, "I am not what he needs me to be." And I was just like, I know that feel. I was not what my dad needed me to be either.
Yeah, that's really powerful. Also, it's really cool to see a feat of strength from a Krogan in this scene, because you don't really get to see, like, you do a little bit in the other games, but like this, you essentially just see him rip a section of the wall out of the ground and throw it to the side to make a path for you. And it's just, we haven't up until this point seen something like that.
Yes. So Krogan to the rescue. He lets us continue on. We have a lot of blue suns to fight. I found a weird thing happen. I went through a door and there was a blue sun mercenary shooting at other blue sun mercenaries on the other side of the chasm. And like when I came out, they shot him and he died. And I was just very confused as to what had happened.
That must have been a glitch, because I didn't experience anything like that.
Like, I just came out and there was a blue sun who is firing at the blue suns across the way, and he didn't even get a chance to turn around and fight me before he was killed. And I was just like, wait, what?
Yeah, that's odd.
I double checked the body. It was definitely a blue sun. What happened? There were a couple of other annoying things that happen in combat. Like, I'm shooting and Jack would actually jump in front of me as I was shooting someone and then yell at me and tell me to watch where I'm shooting.
Yeah, we've said this before and we'll say it again. The AI in this game is far from perfect. They have perfect moments, but definitely they don't know how to stay out of fire. They get in your way. They don't always respond fast enough. Sometimes they fall over quickly. I didn't have any of those issues this time. The combat actually was pretty mind-numbing for me this time. Like, there were no difficulties. I got to use all of my abilities. I could charge around more. It felt like a more natural combat situation. But that said, that's also because it's a fairly straightforward fight. Even the boss fight, when we get to it, is pretty straightforward. And so, like, the reason I didn't struggle, I think, this time is because there was nothing to struggle with.
Yeah. I've been using powers a lot more, which I didn't do as much in 1 because the powers were just so slow and weren't as reliable. I have Cryoblast, I have my power armor, I have Slam now instead of Barrier, and I have Warp, which is great against armor, and Throw. I think that's all I have right now. Oh, and Overlord. Not Overlord, Overload.
That's something.
Overlord is something different, yeah.
Yeah, I'm using my powers a lot too. For me, they're on the number keybinds on the keyboard. The only thing I miss about having a controller is you could set one shortcut key for one of your powers to always use all the time, and then have the wheel for everything else, or for several powers actually. Whereas this, the shortcuts are all the number keys, and they're not that hard to use. But sometimes I get confused which powers bound where, but I use Shockwave all the time, especially on this stage, because they'd all be ducking behind cover. I'd send out Shockwave and they'd go flying like confetti, and then I would just pick them off. I have Lift, which I like using, but the problem is that I'm having on the PC that I don't think I ever had on the console is I used to do a really mean curveball with Pull or Lift. Like, I would aim up and to the right if they were behind cover, and I'd be able to arc it in a way that I'd still get them. That doesn't seem to work on the PC, but it could just be. But it could also just be my positioning. It's hard to really tell. I use charge a bunch. You know, when you're dealing with non-shield blue sun fodder, essentially, they're very easy to charge in and take out, which is always a lot of fun. I think that the utility of the Vanguard is knowing when to charge in and when not. Also, I'm using the Geth shotgun, which is a bonus item, and it's a long-range shotgun, essentially.
Oh, that's neat.
So you'll always do better damage at close range, but at long range, it fires like a laser beam almost, and so you can still hit things, which is great because it means the only problem is it has very low ammo. So I often run out of ammo using it. But beyond that, it's great. And so it made combat on this mission much easier for me.
So I do think that this mission was visually interesting. It wasn't boring to look at. It wasn't super repetitive, though there were parts where you went up these ramps a couple of times. So that got a little boring, but the rest of it was pretty cool to see. All this broken down tech, all these barriers to hide behind. It was a very interesting field to combat on.
Yeah, the design was really cool. I took some screenshots, which will eventually show up on our social media at some point. But my only complaint is that it doesn't feel lived in. Like, my only complaint is that they've been here a while. They've been making these guys for a while. And through everything we traversed, there weren't really many beds or many, like, facilities besides the few labs we passed through. And so it was noticeable. It felt kind of vast. But beyond that, like, looking out over the horizon and seeing all of the different space was really cool. It did feel large. It just didn't feel as lived in as I would have liked. Whereas, like, the previous missions, like, the attention to detail in those missions was insane. And this one, while not boring to look at, I agree, I felt like it just didn't have enough to feel like as much of a real lived in place as the other missions had.
Let's see. So when we finally fight our way through, we run into a familiar face, because I think we both did the same thing at Vermeer. Mm-hmm. There was an Asari on Vermeer named Rana who is helping Saren with his Krogan clones that were immune to the genophage or whatever. And Rana is here on Corliss helping Okeer with a similar goal.
Yeah, we make it pretty clear that we're not happy about running into you in these kinds of places. And she makes it clear she was not so happy about seeing us either, but reassures us that she's doing good work and that what she's been doing with Okeer is for the greater good and was circumventing the Blue Suns.
Yeah, I wonder if this mission is harder or plays out differently if Rana is not there to shut off the cameras when she notices that it's you.
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, like maybe there are more waves of enemies. I'm not sure, honestly. And I know I've taken that path. I just don't recall it, to be honest. So if it impacted, it didn't impact significantly enough that I would have retained that.
Right.
But yeah, and you have a chat with her, and like for me, I reminded her that I gave her a chance to run, and I tell her that she may want to do the same, and she's like, "No bones from me. I don't want to be anywhere you are. I'll start running now. I'm out of here." Like, she was very content to take a hike again.
Yeah, and Jack said that I was too nice to her. I was like,
Same.
I did blow up the last place she was employed. So
yeah, Jack said the same thing to me. So clearly we're still on the same parallel Paragon path, the two of us.
Yeah, though I was a little renegade much earlier, but that's okay. Yeah, I found it weird that we're basically Okeer's escape plan. Like, we show up
and like
to
when you
take him
get
away.
to him in the next room, he's pretty much like, and you see that he's got this Krogan that looks very different from other Krogan you've encountered in a giant tank, and he's like, "You need to take me and this now. Let's get out of here." And of course, Jador finds out and starts to fill the room with toxic gas, and so you run off to go fight Jador while he finishes some stuff up. And even the first time I played 2, I went, "He dead." There's no way. Like, this is such a tropey scene. It drives me bonkers. And I get why they did it. But, like, the minute the gas starts to fill the room and I'm not stuck there and he stays behind, I'm like, oh, okay, he's going to die. But it didn't occur to me that we'd be taking the other Krogan with us, the one in the tank, immediately. And this boss fight is very whatever. I took out my arc gun and just zapped the mechs until they blew up and then zapped her. Like, it took no time at all.
I remember this fight being harder.
Same.
And this time around, I think maybe I'm just a better player and I knew where to use my cover and everything.
Yeah.
And I was able to wear Jador down with my powers very quickly and took her out. And I was in, like, the perfectly right spot so that the security mech could not, like, reach me, really. So when it fired at me, it couldn't hit me. And when I came out around cover, it still couldn't really hit me. So I was able to wear it down. And it was much more successful than I'd been in the past. I definitely didn't die during this fight like I have.
Same. Yeah, I didn't die at all. Like I said, because I had max heavy ammo and I don't use the arc gun that often, I just honestly forget I have a heavy weapon. Like, I took it out, so I had 9 shots and went, oh, this will be fast, and literally just destroyed everything. It's a very overpowered weapon that I rarely use because I like the interaction of the combat in this game, but I remember this fight, like you, being fairly difficult, and I was like, nope, none of it. I want to destroy you, and so I did. And then we go back up into the lab, and there's a message auto-playing from Okir about how this specimen, this Krogan, will turn the tide of the Krogan people, and that he must be protected, and you must take him with you. It was actually kind of creepy to see his body on the floor with the vid playing above him. Like, it was just unnerving, which it should be. Like, but it made me uneasy, which a lot of things in this game haven't done. But that moment really did make me feel kind of uneasy.
Let's see. So after we find out what happened to Okir, who gave himself, I guess, for the safety of his creation, real father of the year, we take the tank with us.
Yep. And the minute you get back to the ship, of course, Miranda and Jacob are arguing over this.
Of course, because that's all they do.
Right. And Miranda is, as usual, unhappy because you have a Krogan in stasis on your ship in a tiny cargo space. This is your opportunity to make a joke about it being a giant paperweight, which I enjoyed, honestly.
Agree.
And then, yeah, Jacob's like, I don't know. Like, Jacob doesn't necessarily disagree with Miranda. He just doesn't think it's a bad idea per se, but like, he also is leery. Like, the reality of this conversation is I don't think anyone on the ship thought it was a good idea.
Well, we often do things that no one thinks is a good idea, but we do them anyway.
Yeah. And so typically after these briefs, we end the mission, but I, eager to get my new teammate, went to the cargo hold directly to the pod and wanted to let him out because it's actually one of my favorite cutscenes in the second game. And so we both did that. And what's really cool about this is before you release him, you can have a conversation with Edie to try and gauge if it's a good idea. And the bottom line is Edie's like, I don't know, man. Statistics say it's not a good idea, but I don't really know. This is an unknown quantity.
Edie says something that I find to be really interesting. She says, the switch and consequences are yours, which makes her sound really judgy. And I'm like, are you supposed to be judgmental as an AI? Are you? Because I feel like that's a human thing.
I mean, technically, artificial intelligence is opposite, differ from bots and robots in the fact that they can develop these kinds of things. But yeah, it does seem a little snarkier for someone who's still, finger quotes, learning to be more human.
So what did you decide to do?
So, of course, I let him out. And what's really cool about this scene is when you release the tank, the water drains, this Krogan drops to his knees and coughs out water and then stands up, and the camera pulls behind Shepard's shoulder. And it's the first time, I think, in the entire Mass Effect series where you really get a sense of scale for the Krogan. Like, he looks massive, and it's also forced perspective, but like it feels almost like a fairly kaiju kind of moment. Like, it's just this giant being stands up and then, of course, immediately picks you up and slams you into a wall.
Which is kind of terrifying as a woman.
Yeah, well, I'd imagine. I mean, to be fair, for me, it was terrifying in general. But yeah, like, I can imagine even more so.
There's an extra layer of terror.
Yeah. Oh, for sure.
So you have this conversation with him, and he basically tells you that Okeer failed to imprint feelings. Like, the knowledge is there, but there's no connection. So this character does not really care about any of Okeer's goals. He just knows about them. And now he has to find his own way. And to emerge into life already knowing, well, my dad's plan for me is not gonna work. I need my own thing. It's just...
Yeah. And also, like, then while holding you, has a fairly calm and casual conversation, which speaks to the fact that he's somewhat of a higher being, even though he's innately got this rage. He knows also that he should have, while you're pinned, this is the time for him to talk to you. And like, it's really interesting to hear him run through it and then talk about like how the imprint failed, how he wants to fight, but he doesn't know fighting for the Krogan is his greater goal. And then when figuring out what to call himself, harps on the word grunt, which is how Okeer refers to him, and takes on that name and decides to take on that name.
Yeah, especially since grunt doesn't really mean anything like in the grand sense of things.
Right. And he also, in that moment, starts to talk to you. You tell him how, at least for me, I told him how, like, I do whatever it takes to get the job done. We're on a very important mission. Your strength would be a big help. Those kinds of things. He assesses you and decides to join your team. And then, for me at least, I think it's just standard.
Yeah.
It pans out and you're holding a pistol to his stomach. And you're like, well, it's a good thing you decided to agree. And it actually makes Grunt laugh, and he admires you and then says he looks forward to doing battle head-to-head with you after this mission is over, which is like, okay.
Yeah, pure Krogan instinct. Absolutely no life experience. I am happy that we have Grunt instead of Okeer, though, because having Okeer and Mordin on the same ship would have been insane.
It would have been. Also, just to shout out, there are many reasons why Grunt is my favorite character in this game. Besides him just being an excellent character who has an insane amount of growth and development over the course of the game, he is voiced by one of my favorite all-time voice actors, Stephen Bloom, who you may know voicing Spike Spiegel from Cowboy Bebop. And
I certainly would not know that.
Or you would know him as the voice of Wolverine in literally all Marvel media that is not live action. All of the cartoons after the 90s cartoon and all of the video games that feature Wolverine of any kind has his voice. He's a prolific voice actor who's appeared in a ton of anime and cartoons, and is one of my favorites. So it's really cool to hear him as Grunt, because he also doesn't just use his speaking voice, which he often uses for other things. He puts a spin on it that if you're not super familiar with his work, you might not even notice.
Yeah, I don't think I know anything that Stephen Bloom has done except for this.
Well, that's fine. You do know him from earlier in the game, because he was also the guy that Miranda kills in the very first mission.
Right.
That is his speaking voice. But yeah, I really dig Grunt. I think that he's a fun character because he's kind of this blank slate who also isn't a blank slate, because he knows a ton with zero life experience, which I think is actually quite interesting for a character.
Yeah, he just has no context for any of it. It's like Kyle XY. Do you remember that show?
I was not a fan, but I know you were.
I was such a fan of that show. He was very attractive and was also very weird, which is my wheelhouse. So he is a clone, fully formed, and he already has a lot of pre-existing knowledge, but he doesn't really have any context for it, and he doesn't have any social graces, and he has to learn all of this as he goes. My favorite scene ever was when he picked up a guitar and was not good at it for the first 10 seconds, and someone said, "It's okay, not everybody's good at music," and then 10 seconds later he figured it out and played like this amazing acoustic ballad, and I was like, yes.
One last thing I want to say about Grunt is, in this close-up scene when he's holding you against the wall, it is some of my favorite graphics and design in the game too. Like, from the curve of his lip to the consistency of his scales on his head. Like, everything just has a level of detail that is phenomenal to me, because also a lot of the other characters we don't get that close to. We do zoom in on them, but because this is meant to feel uncomfortable, it's so tight in, you can really notice a lot of the really great design in this character, which I really love every time I get to see it.
Okay, so that was the Warlord.
Yup.
Hooray! Let's move on to Fandom Corner. I struggled to find something for this week. I was hoping to find some grunt-centered fanfic, but not a lot of people write about our lizard son, so...
It's very sad. He's the best lizard son.
If anybody has any grunt fanfic, send it to me. Just wholesome stuff, nothing weird, please. I can't with Grunt, because I view him as a child.
Yeah.
Which he is. He is a day old. But I did find a podcast called Less Than Stellar. It's the outrageous misadventures of the galaxy's best worst merc team. It's an actual play podcast set in the Mass Effect universe, and it follows the adventures of this really, really bad mercenary team.
Nice. That sounds like a lot of fun, actually.
Yeah. They're currently on a month-long hiatus, so now is a really good time to get caught up. They release every other week. Looks like on their team there's a human, a Solarian, a Turian, a Quarian, and an Asari. So, no Krogan. Sorry, Matt.
Sad. Yeah.
But I am going to be on a plane for a very long time, so this is perfect for me.
Yeah, I struggle with actual play podcasts. Part of it comes from, following narratives are hard for me. I like to listen to podcasts more or less as background noise. So it's a lot of talking heads and, informational podcasts. I don't really listen to a lot of narrative stuff, because if you try and do that while not paying attention, you miss it. And so they're not necessarily my bag, but I would definitely listen for an episode or two just to get the idea of it, because I do like the idea of them, and I like being on them, as I have rarely in the past. But listening to them is tough for me, because I like the noise of podcasts. There are some podcasts that I absolutely focus in on, but if I happen to drift listening to a podcast about video games that's just updating me on the latest stuff or talking about reviews, if I miss a sentence or two, I won't be completely lost. Whereas really heavily narrative driven stuff, it's like you miss two sentences. You're like, wait, where are we? Sorry, what's the story? I don't understand what's going on.
Yeah, I really love narrative podcasts. I love The Adventure Zone, especially this current arc, Amnesty. I love The Bright Sessions. I was really into Welcome to Night Vale until they completely betrayed me with one particular story arc. At me on Twitter, I'll tell you all about it. So actual play podcasts are fun for me to listen to when they do not focus entirely on mechanics. If you can let go of mechanics and just tell your story together as a team, that's really interesting to me, because I love collaborative storytelling.
I mean, that's legit. Like I said, it's not that I don't like them because they're not good. It's just, my listening style doesn't really mesh with them. That said, on long drives or long plane rides and stuff, I will download certain ones and listen to them. So maybe I'll store this one in the back of my mind for a later date. Yeah,
that is at Stellar Podcast on Twitter, and you can find Less Than Stellar on any podcatcher. They are particularly on iTunes.
Awesome.
So, yeah, that was the Fandom Corner. Yay!
One last thing I do want to say about this week's episode, since it is sort of on the shorter side, is that a lot of that comes from this mission. It's easily the shortest mission we've done so far. There's not much meat to it. And we're going to find a lot of those missions until we start getting to mid-game.
Yeah, honestly, all of these missions are bite-sized. So every episode devoted to a mission is going to also be bite-sized.
You know, unless we have people like Drew Mick here spouting nonsense that distracts us and has us talking about Rock Band for 10 minutes.
Well, speaking of having people on the podcast, our next episode is going to be Horizon, and we're going to have Ursula Huxtable of the Queer Dungeoneers podcast. I'm very excited.
Yes, I'm very excited to have Ursula on. They're a delight, and it should be fun. Horizon's going to be really interesting. Like, this is our first Earth colony since the last Earth colony we went to in the very beginning of the game. And so this is where we're going to get more narrative. We've been getting narrative up to this point, but mostly we've just been recruiting. This is going to be the first mission in a little while where we're going to get more info on the collectors, I have to assume, because it's another colony that's been attacked.
Horizon will drive the story forward. I'm also excited to have Ursula on because she's one of my pod crushes.
Aww. You hear that, Ursula? I don't know Ursula that well, but, you know, I'm sure she's lovely.
Okay, so like I said, next episode, Horizon. If you like what you heard here, follow us on social media. We are at ReignitePod on Twitter, Tumblr, and Instagram. You can find us on Facebook, facebook.com/reignitepod, or send us an email at reignitepod@gmail.com. Please go ahead and rate, review, and subscribe on your favorite podcatcher. We read emails and reviews on the podcast. And if you tell your friends about us, then more people will listen to us, and maybe we'll finally break 500 downloads in a month.
Yeah, we really love it when you guys write reviews or send us emails. At the end of the day, we're doing this for the community and to be a part of a bigger conversation because we're obsessed with this game just like the rest of you. But specifically on iTunes and Facebook, those reviews really help us to get noticed and featured, and that's the only way this community will grow. Another way to help us grow and or join in the conversation is to go to certainpov.com. We are members of the Certain Point of View Network. Again, it's at certainpov.com, and you can find a ton of nerdy podcasts, each with a unique point of view. And you can also find a permanent invite to our Discord server, which is a great way to chat. We have everything from memes to in-depth conversations to life stuff to game recommendations. Currently, I'm obsessing with a game called Gato Roboto, where you are a cat in a mech. That's it. That's all you need to know. I mean, it was for me, which is on Switch and PC. But yeah, go to our Discord and chat with us. I personally love creeping around because I don't really say much, and watching MJ interact with everyone like a normal person.
Thank you to Christina Spinks for our latest It's Okay to Be a Marshmallow t-shirt on Redbubble, featuring our favorite marshmallow, Caden Nolenko. Though after Horizon, who knows if he'll be anyone's favorite marshmallow. Dun dun dun.
Ba ba ba.
You can find more of her work at Chaos Does Art on Instagram. We'd also like to thank David Boyle for designing our logo, which you can also get on a shirt through Redbubble, and Dan Bull for letting us use the Mass Effect rap for our theme music.
Again, we're going to be doing Horizon next time, so play that mission. We're so excited to have Ursula on the show. And with that, I think it's a good time for me and MJ to say, as always, we should go.
Hey Nerferders, my name is Case Aiken, and for over 2 years I've hosted my show, Another Pass, where I sit down with interesting guests to talk about movies that we find fascinating but flawed. Good movies, bad movies, doesn't matter. We find ways that they could have been improved. So if you ever thought that a sequel dropped the ball by forgetting about a plotline, that an epic could have been saved by introducing the director to an editor, or that a comedy didn't work hard enough to have some substance behind the laughs, then check out Another Pass podcast at certainpov.com or wherever you get your podcasts.